One of the biggest problems living countryside or in rural areas, unpopulated areas that are far away from certain stores, is commute time. What I found is that as I get older, if I have to drive more than a half hour one way to a store or location, I start to lose quality of life because I have to deal with more traffic. Takes longer to get there, takes longer to come back. You have to, your body's a little beat up after you get out of the car. So, a couple things. One is this doesn't just apply to living in a rural area. Like, even if you lived in an area and you had to commute an hour to work, or you had to go an hour to a different community to get to a store you like, it would still apply. It's like the half hour rule. Like, once you have to travel or commute more than a half hour in one direction, your quality of life begins to deteriorate because you allocate more of your time in the day to driving, which by default means traffic, which by default, you just lose a little bit out of your day, right? So now there's different seasons. There was times I really liked to drive around, and there was times where I commuted far to work when I lived a stationary life. So there's different seasons, but as I get older, I want to spend less time commuting. And there's difference between taking a road trip or taking a vacation, right? And even that, it becomes brutal after a period of time. And even my heart goes out to truck drivers, even though I know some of them, they have a passion for that. But that's why I said it's a very unhealthy job at times, because you're spending long periods of time on the road. You're not using your body. And, it's dangerous to drive, until we get to the point where we probably do self-driving cars, which will be a lot safer. But even that, just sitting awake for more than a half hour is unhealthy, right? Because they say, like, even at a desk, if you sit, you should get up every 45 minutes and go for a 10-minute walk to let the blood flow through your body. When your body is not sleeping, when it's awake, it's not meant to sit for more than an hour. It really, a half hour is kind of what is probably your limit, so an hour would be like max. And that's what I mean. When you live in a rural area, if you had a tiny community or a tiny house in the middle of nowhere, if you had a home base in the middle of nowhere, if you camped in the middle of nowhere, you want to do something with your day. You may want to go to certain stores or be by certain areas. And, like, same thing, like, or living an hour away from the beach and you wanted to go to the beach every day. Like, eventually that will not be part of your daily routine because that hour commute is just too much. And same thing with the workplace. There may be a season of your life where you have to commute an hour or so to work. And some people do it their entire career. You do what you got to do when you got to do it. But I'm talking about as you get to the point, as you try to build your best life, you're trying to make things better, right? Which is not easy, which takes time, sometimes years, sometimes, but I always strive for better, Some people just settle, and nothing's ever perfect, and everyone has their individual circumstance. I'm just speaking from my perspective. So I always look at my life, all right, what do I really need to do to improve my situation? And, some of it, once I begin to pick a location I mainly want to spend time, it's like, okay, I want to build my daily routine, not my house, right? Per se, right? I want to build a life that I go from point A to point B. I do these different things when I'm awake, okay? And that's creating a quality of life. And once you do that, if you have to start to go from A to B for more than an hour, you're not incentivized to do it. You begin to be a little bit more unhealthy, a little bit more aggravation with road rage. So this is the number one thing when you're more than an hour away from something, right? Amenities, infrastructure, and activities, whatever, right? Even if it's a park that you like to walk in, if you're more than an hour away from it or an hour away from it, it's very tough to build that in your daily routine. If you're a half hour away from something, that's acceptable, but more than a half hour begins to become a problem. And that's been my experience, not my theory. My experience and something that I go through and I try to look at. So, okay, if I change this, it's tough though, because it's like life, it's like, okay, if I change this, if I move to this area, then I'm close to these things, but not this thing. I can't lie to you. There's nothing where you get everything. Okay. And obviously the more areas that you move in that have more amenities, they're more congested. Right. So, and You may want some, you're trying to find balance, which is very tough. And that's what we always talk about. So you move in the middle of nowhere, you have all this quiet privacy that's not congested, but you have nothing else, right? So that may be, and everyone's different. Everyone has a different fingerprint. So my perspective is not yours, but I want to share this video on this topic that once you begin to live more than a half hour away from something, once you have to commute an hour or so in one direction, because remember, you got to come back if you go in one direction, then it becomes a little bit of a burden, unsustainable, unhealthy even. So, those are just my thoughts. Click the thumbs up. You appreciate this video. Subscribe, share, become a member, and thank you to my members and all those who watch. Thank you.